Hi everyone, welcome to my channel, Babbling Books. If this is your first time here, my name is Elaine and welcome. So I'm going to do my April wrap up. If my voice sounds odd, it's because it is allergy season here in Texas and the air is literally trying to kill everyone. So I lost my voice for like 2 weeks, which is why it took me so long to get this video made. And I'm still not quite back to normal, but I enjoy making these so much that I figured I would just go ahead with it. So last month was a pretty good reading month. I enjoyed everything that I read, but I was on the hunt for a certain kind of a book and I couldn't find one. So that sort of, I don't know, kind of put me in a reading slump, which I'm still not quite out of, which is why I only read 7 books last month. But 2 were physical copies and the other 5 were all on audio. The first book that I read was A Tree Grows in Brooklyn by Betty Smith. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with this book, but this is my first time reading it, and I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it. So, Betty Smith was born and raised in Brooklyn at the turn of the century, which is the setting for this novel. So it is semi-autobiographical. So the main character is Francie, and it is basically the story of her life up into, I want to say, her very late teens, early 20s. Now it's told in the 4th person, which I did check to make sure that that was accurate, because I sort of wavered. But anyway, so Francie lives in Brooklyn with her mother, her little brother, and her father. And her father is an alcoholic, and he's not abusive, but he is definitely negligent. And there's a lot of really just sort of harsh things through the book that these children and the parents have to deal with because they are in such dire circumstances because they are so very poor. And one of the things that I really, really enjoyed about this book was the author doesn't just focus on Francie. She gives the backstories for Francie's mother, Francie's father, how they met, how they got together, you know, how things started and then got to where they are now. You find out the backstories of her mother's sisters and her mother and her grandparents, and the backstory of her father and his siblings and his parents, so the grandparents. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. There's lots of observations in the neighborhood, lots of details about the way that they lived, for things from how they were able to bathe to the games the mother would kind of play to keep the children from realizing how desperate things were becoming. So absolutely fantastic. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. After that, I listened to books 1 through 5 on Audible. The Will Roby series by David Baldacci. So these are like, I'm going to say spy thrillers, but the main character is actually an assassin who works for the CIA, who works for the government. And it's very like off the books, meaning like if he goes and performs an assassination in Europe and he is caught by the authorities, the government will not recognize his existence. He's on his own. So when the book starts, Will Roby is sent to assassinate an American on American soil, which is almost unheard of. So Will Roby is immediately sort of caught off guard, and he shows up to kill this woman on behalf of his government. And he's noticing these little things that just don't add up. So from that moment on, Roby's life just takes a turn for the worse. And he's now being hunted by the government. And he's fighting for his life. And he's trying to figure out how this happened and how to get his life back. While all that's going on, you're introduced to another main character who is a teenage girl. And she is running for her life, and their paths cross, and Roby helps her, and the two of them sort of stick together and try to do what they can to get, their lives back. I liked both of the characters. They are very well fleshed out. The teenage girl, especially, I cannot remember her name, was my favorite character. I really, really liked that aspect of the book a lot. The plot moves along very briskly through all 5 books. The plots are good in all 5 books. Will Roby, his characterizations remain consistent from book 1 all the way to book 5, which I also appreciate. I hate, usually, when characters undergo these massive transformations through the series, because usually if I liked a book enough to read a series that is excessively long, it's because I liked the character. I'm a very character-driven reader. So that was not an issue I had with this book, which I did appreciate. So book 2, Will Roby is sent to assassinate another operative, a assassin, who also works for the American government. But she's gone rogue, and they have sent Will Roby after her because they are the top 2 assassins for the American government. I liked her character a lot too. I'm not going to go into the plot a lot because it will, be full of spoilers. But as far as the whole series go, I enjoyed books 1 through 5, all pretty equally. All the plots were good. I will say, however, and I cannot remember if it was book 3 or book 4, I've got to do better at taking notes before I make these videos. We're moving along, great. We're following this main plot, which is set up basically from chapter 1, and all of a sudden the author diverges to this subplot that has nothing to do with the main plot. It literally had nothing to do with it. Like, if that whole 150 pages was removed from the book, it wouldn't have changed anything. I told my husband what it felt like was the author had this idea, but he couldn't expand it to an entire novel, so he stuck it into the book. If he had been able to expand it to an entire novel of its own, it would have been really good. But that's not what he chose to do, or he couldn't do, I'm not sure. So he stuck it in here, and it was just weird and sort of jarring. And so that sucked some of my enjoyment from that particular book. But I got over it, moved on, and I recommend the whole series anyway. And that is the Will Roby series by David Baldacci. Book 1 is The Innocent. After that, I read Vox by, I think her first name is Christine Doucher. I spent this entire book from page 1 to like almost the last page just pissed off, okay? Just livid through the whole damn thing. So in this book, which is set in the not too distant future, I mean, you could almost, current times, in the sense of linear time, I'm not making a jab at anything political. Women are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to have access to literature or to computers. Like even the main character, her cookbooks are held under lock and key that her husband is the only one that has access to. She has, I want to say she has 2 sons, but it's only the oldest son that I remember very well, and a daughter. And she was a doctor that specialized in aphasia, which it affects people in different ways, but just to explain it in a quick version, I guess, it affects people's ability to speak. So she's not allowed to work. And the worst part is the females, from elementary aged girls up to grandmamas, are forced to wear these wristbands that count down the amount of words that they are allowed to use in a 24-hour period. So if they exceed their 100-word allotment, they receive a shock, an electrical shock through the wristband, which intensifies with every word that passes over 100. And this is on little girls, on all the females. And this is not really a spoiler because it doesn't have anything to do with the plot. But to give you an idea of the content of this book and why I found it so enraging, the little girl wakes up and is screaming she's had a nightmare. And the mother comes rushing in, and rather than picking the little girl up and holding her and petting her on the back and whispering to her that everything's going to be okay and all those just things that you say to your child, she runs in, jumps on top of the little girl, and slaps her hand on top of her mouth to keep her from speaking, because the mom does not want her to receive these electrical shocks. The mother does not want her to have to spend 24 hours in complete silence because she used up all of her words during this panic. So then the dad rushes in, takes the little girl from the mom because the mom can't comfort her, and is holding her and, rubbing her back and saying all the things that a parent would say. And the mom just stands there and watches it, and she's enraged and so, so sad. And, just right before all of that happened, she just had to stand there while the father read the little girl her bedtime stories because the mom couldn't do it. And then earlier before that, the oldest son, oh, sorry, my phone is telling me it's low. Sorry. And then right before that, the whole family's sitting down to dinner, and the son is asking his little sister questions, and the mom starts to wonder if he's purposely baiting his sister to waste her words, because they've all learned over the course of a year that they need to ask questions that are yes or no, so that these women and girls do not waste their words. But anyway, I spent the entire book just pissed off beyond belief. But I would still prefer The Handmaid's Tale to this book. And the reason being is because I didn't particularly like or enjoy reading the plot. I liked or enjoyed reading about how she survived the day-to-day and how it affected her and how she felt about it, and observing the other women in the neighborhood and trying to do what she could for her daughter. I enjoyed that aspect of the book, but I did not so much enjoy the plot of the book, but I did like the ending a lot. So all in all, I could say that I do recommend this book, but it was probably like a 3.5-star rating for me. But at the same time, a book that can invoke those sort of feelings in me is a good book. So if that's something that interests you, I recommend that you read it. So that was all of my reading for last month. So on to asking you guys for some recommendations. I want to read a book that is like a military thriller, or something like Altered Carbon. Something that's, violent and gritty. Sci-fi is perfectly fine. I enjoy reading sci-fi a lot. So any recommendations for something like that? Something kind of like Jason Bourne-esque would be good too, but I've already read those. So spy, assassin, or special ops thrillers, I would really like some recommendations, or anything that reminds you of Altered Carbon. I would like some recommendations for something like that. And to just give you a little sneak peek of my next wrap up, I am currently reading a nonfiction book about Saudi Arabia. It's called Inside the Kingdom, and it's sort of a cultural, economical, political history of Saudi Arabia from the turn of the century to current times. Of course, it's got a lot of things about Islam, since Saudi Arabia is an Islamic nation, which I'm enjoying learning about that, because there were some things I didn't know. And I am reading, I'm on book 2 of a military thriller series. It's just okay. I'm listening to it on audio, but I would love to replace the series with something that I'm really, really enjoying. But I'm having a hard time finding something. And I started a sci-fi last night. It's a military science fiction. I haven't made a lot of progress in it yet. So hopefully it gets a little bit better, because right now I'm not feeling it. I have been in a book slump for like 2 months, where I'm enjoying the books that I'm reading, but I'm not loving them. I'd like, other than A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, but I'd really like to find something that I love. And it hasn't happened since, oh man, February, maybe March. So anyway, some recommendations would be fantastic. If you've read anything recently that you just blew your socks off, drop it in the comments. I'd love to look into it. But thank you very much for clicking on my video, and I hope you guys, will come back. Bye.